All right, we are live. Give me a second here. Did you get some rest?
I don't know. I couldn't sleep late. I wanted to. I stayed in the bed late, but I didn't sleep late.
All right.
I did a lot of my phone calls and emails from the bed.
All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. Been a little while since we did this. We've been focused on the special session stuff. Just before we get to it, just want to say shout out to a few people that are supportive of us. First of all, we have hollers hollering all across the state, thanks to your support. So we do appreciate that. $10 a month or more, and you get one of these sweet holler hats like the one I'm wearing. Shout out to Abby Rubenfeld for being supportive of us. If you need a lawyer, go through Abby. If you need a home, Middle Tennessee, Elisa Parker is who you should check out. All right, let's get to it. So today we are going to chat with our friend Rep Gloria Johnson, who is here to help us process this special session that just happened, which if you follow the Holler, you know just happened. Vouchers, the scam just passed in both the Senate and the House, and will now go to Governor Lee's desk where he will eagerly sign it. And a lot of nonsense went down in a very short period of time. Gloria, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right. I mean, I'm mourning the loss of public education for 1 million Tennessee students. I'm mourning the loss of our democratic processes when now an elected official at any level in the state who votes their conscience or their district could go to prison for 6 years if they vote in such a way that dear leader doesn't like.
Yeah, so just to elaborate on that a little bit, basically you're talking about part of the immigration law, the immigration crackdown that just passed includes a provision that essentially makes it a felony for local officials to vote for what they call sanctuary policies, which is sort of a vaguely defined thing, but essentially makes it so that local communities or local police forces don't or can't communicate with ICE to turn in undocumented people in their communities. So, sanctuary policies are, I think, outlawed in Tennessee, but if a vote were cast in favor of them, that would be a felony. Is that correct?
Well, and again, it's undefined. This is so vague. It could be any immigration policy. I mean, it's so unconstitutional. And to have two lawyers, William Lambert and what's that little guy's name? Gino Balso, to have them stand up there and say that this is constitutional and that gives some precedent that has nothing to do with what we just did is outrageous because our Constitution is extremely clear on this. I think, say we had a corrupt Supreme Court, even a corrupt Supreme Court would say that this is unconstitutional. It is so blatant. But to say that when it comes to voting on certain policy, if I don't vote the way they say, then I can be convicted of a felony and go to prison for 6 years is insane.
It's fascism. Like, I think people are always talking about or thinking about fascism as
Yeah,
though, it's like goose stepping through the streets. But no, this is what it is. It's playing games with the laws to silence dissent
yeah.
and make sure that people are not voting in a way that you don't like. And I thought actually Antonio Parkinson had a good point because he brought up the trigger ban. All the time state Republicans are passing laws that fly in the face of federal law. They do this all the time. So basically what they're saying is the federal government should be able to pass a law that makes them felons.
Well, understand that multiple times yesterday, William Lambert stood up there and argued against something that he was doing right then.
Exactly.
I mean, with that immigration policy, he said, let the feds handle immigration. Yes, let Fred Thompson handle immigration after Gabby Salinas spoke about her own personal story.
Right. We just posted that video. That was really powerful. People should watch that.
It's a great story, and it was hard for her to tell. And we just told her we support you. Tell your story.
Yeah.
Progressive Caucus stood tight with her on that. And people came up and thanked her for her story, but they also voted against her. But while he was saying Fed should handle immigration policy, he was passing a bill with the state talking about federal immigration before they had even gotten guidance from the Trump administration. So what they just passed yesterday may be counter to what the Trump administration wants us to do. It was putting the cart before the horse. It was doing exactly what he was saying we shouldn't do.
So I want to play the video of them carrying the grandmothers out of in committee, but also you had a pretty strongly worded tweet where you said you felt like you had stumbled into a Klan rally at one point. What were your feelings watching your colleagues react to her story and the bill?
Well, a lot of people loved the story. However, there was one rant from a particular member that made me feel like I was at a Klan rally.
Yeah, at the end there, Kip Capley definitely was on one. This is Senator Yarbrough saying Republicans passed a bill making it local elected officials subject to felony charges for casting a vote at odds with Trump immigration policies, a dangerous break from American law and tradition. And Senator Yarbrough is generally fairly even keeled with a lot of this stuff. He's also an attorney, and then to follow that up, you saw Governor Lee is apparently making records of how they're going to enforce these immigration laws confidential, according to the Tennessee Coalition of Open Government. So, this is a frightening moment that we're in at the federal and state level, and people should be eyes wide open about a lot of this stuff. And a lot of it's going to happen in the dark. And that's, I think, what's scaring people and what's causing people to, speak up about it. And at the committee about this, which you were on I think you were there at the committee for this, right?
Yes, I was on the committee.
Yeah,
I was
you were.
not allowed to speak on the full bill when it was amended.
Well, there were some community members, clergy, grandmothers who were there in the audience, and they were actually sitting silently. And somebody said something. I think it was actually Allison Beal who admitted that she said something, but these women had signs that these guys didn't like. And so this is what happened.
You'll stand up for us.
I'm willing to sit back in my chair. That was so
A mother of 5, grandmother of 3 is legally sitting here, not breaking any laws, and I'm being carried out because they don't like seeing my sign that says Jesus was an immigrant and a refugee.
Right.
I do this on behalf of all the immigrants and refugees who are going to be over-policed in this country. It's horrible what's being done to them. That is the reason I am here. And I stand on their behalf. Actually, I'm kneeling on their behalf.
Yes.
I'm kneeling on their behalf right now, as Jesus would do. We are all children of immigrants. We are every one of us a child of immigrants.
We shall not be moved just like a tree.
So watching that back, I'm absolutely horrified. It was an emotional moment. Obviously, it wasn't just her. There were others carried out. Also, the troopers, I don't think even really wanted to do it, but they were following the orders from Chris Todd and Cameron Sexton. Gloria, what are you feeling when you're watching that back?
Yeah, it was apparent that they didn't want to do it. It horrifies me every single time. And, it's such a shame. It shows how petty these men are and how they don't know how to deal with anything real world. There's such a simple way to deal with all of these things that come up in the committee. And it's so frustrating to see them go from 0 to 60 without just the basic ways to deal with a community who's upset in your committee room. It's just remarkable to me that they have no skills whatsoever and no concern for folks who might have a different opinion. And sometimes for me, like I laughed at something earlier in that committee, and um, it was just it was an emotional response because it was so ridiculous. I could not control that laughter. So I understand if something comes out that you can't necessarily control because it's so counter to your nature or something like that. So it was very minimal what was said. And then, as a matter of fact, the bill sponsor heard something he didn't like, jerked his head around. That was William Lambert, and said, "Well, good morning, ladies," or something like that. So they responded back. He initiated conversation with them in the middle of what was going on. So it was a very weird moment. Minimal things were said. And the person who said it admitted it to saying it.
Yeah, that was the thing. Allison Beal, who was there, who ran for state house this past year, she said, "This was me. I'll leave." And they were like, "No, we're taking them out." And the reason is because, those women had signs they didn't like. They're ever present at the legislature, and they wanted to make a point and send a message. Rep. Chris Todd, who was the chair of that committee, is, pretty prone to bullying. And that's what that was. Another committee meeting, and, kind of leading into this other thing that happened that also you were there for, and it's just kind of setting a theme here, which is how people are being treated in committees and where the state of democracy is in Tennessee. This was on the voucher bill. Why don't you set this up for us?
Yeah, this is the situation where we had an amendment on the bill, so we discussed the amendment, and I asked multiple questions about the hold harmless portion. And the bill sponsor talked around it, never got at the question because I asked a specific question. Because in the fiscal note for their bill, it says next year, the TISA formula will be short $45 million because of the vouchers. And then they're saying, but we're going to hold harmless all of these counties. There is $3.3 million in the hold harmless fund. Now, if the budget is $45 million short, and there's $3.3 million in the hold harmless fund, where are the other $42 million coming from? I don't know if that's private school math. I know that the kids with vouchers in Tennessee scored 20 points less than public school kids on math. Maybe that's how they do this. I don't know.
That's the question you were going to ask. And so people understand, there are amendments and you can ask questions about the amendment, and then they have speakers speak. And then you're supposed to go back in a session and talk about the bill itself. And you were going to ask about the bill itself. But before anybody could ask about the bill itself, they did what's called calling the question to cut off all debate on the bill. So it's a $1 billion program, $1 billion scam. And Democrats were not able to ask even one question.
And that's really what I want people watching this to understand. When we had, they would say the bill is in its full form or whatever. They added the amendment. So here's the bill. This is the bill we're going to hear on the floor. And you will hear the leadership on the floor always say, "Oh, we did detailed debate on this bill in committee."
Right.
The bill in the form it was going to the floor in was not allowed to have one single question. Not one.
And so this was you and Rep. Hakeem reacting.
This is a travesty. We're talking about $500 million. I mean, now, and $1 billion by the time we get into.
And by the way, I asked Sapicki about this the next day, and his whole thing was, "Oh, well, I'm just the chair." It's like it's up to they made a motion, and I had to respect the motion. Meanwhile, I've seen the chairs do all kinds of stuff before, including insist on allowing speakers to speak.
It's like, you're just the one in charge of the meeting. Oh, I'm just the one in charge.
That's exactly what I have it on camera. That's what he said.
We're not allowed to question the sponsor on this bill. Outrageous. This is not a democratic process. This is authoritarianism.
If people are not going to be heard, why would you expect them to sit quietly?
See, and he, he goes on, and Hakeem is not somebody prone to, reactions like that. So if Hakeem, if Hakeem's reacting that way, something's definitely wrong.
Yeah, if Rep Hakeem is pissed, something bad just happened.
Right. So what do you think, how do the rules get this way, and what can Dems do and what should Dems do?
Well, so what the thing I feel about, we did what we could do in this moment, and that was when they called the question, we objected. And you have to have 3 members raise their hand and object. Then there's a vote on that objection, but there's 17 of them and 6 of us. So of course they're going to override our objection. But, and you have to do what you can do to make yourself heard. My mic was off, but I was loud enough, even though I'm losing my voice, I was loud enough to let people know what is happening, because a lot of times how this works is hard for the folks at home to understand. And they can only see the person. Most of the time, the camera's only on the person talking.
Yeah.
That's intentional. The Republicans don't want you to see everything that's going on up there. And so that's a problem in committee. But normally, understand this as well. At the beginning of that committee, he said he was going to allow members 1 question and maybe a follow-up. I have never been limited verbally on the amount of questions I can ask about a bill. This is where we really have a hashing out of the bill and what it does. It helps constituents at home who are wondering about
it. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I feel like it's important to point out here is, Dems get bullied up there for sure and silenced up there. And, there's this general feeling that, Dems have very little power. But it feels like Republicans kind of don't have much power either. Leadership has the power. Leadership tells people what to do. And I feel like these guys are kind of cogs in the machine also.
Oh, sometimes, but I think we should really stick to what the Republican supermajority is doing. And we will talk, we can talk about that as well. But the problem is, for most of them, most of the time, they will not speak up. It's not
right.
Not
That's
a
what
lot.
I mean the rank and file, like the members who know it's wrong,
Right.
who know the laws are wrong. They're being bullied and told what to do. They don't stand up to their leadership.
Well,
Obviously the leadership has a lot of power, but these guys know better than this, and they're not doing much.
That's the thing. They know better and they don't stand up. And the sad part is, I don't think the majority of Republicans, the rank and file, read the bill.
Yeah.
They believed what they were told about hold harmless, and it was a blatant lie.
Right.
Fiscal note, it's crystal clear in the fiscal note that they are lying.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that there's $1 billion, it's like $1 billion in 4 or 5 years, that somehow that's not going to hurt public schools. Where's that going to come from if it's not going to hurt public schools? And if you're spending $1 billion on education and it isn't going to public schools, that's hurting public schools, because you're going to be less inclined for improvements to schools, teacher raises. It's like the Hawkins County superintendent said, you're splitting up the pie, and obviously it's coming from somewhere.
Right. And it's just a shell game of where it's not coming from this pile.
Right.
Play your shell game with me. It's all coming from the budget, baby.
Right.
But more importantly, just honing in on what their fiscal note says. The first year of this, 45 million short. There is only 3.3 million in the hold harmless budget. The math ain't mathing, folks. I don't know how many times I have to say this about these Republicans, but they are telling you lies.
Yep.
And that kind of gets at where we were in how the debate was handled on the floor. And that's what I would really like to talk a bit about, that, because so you see them shut down the debate completely by calling the question in committee. And we know we've seen them do it on the floor as well.
Yep.
That stinks when you have something to say. It really stinks when you have something to say and you're not allowed to do it because they call the question before there's ever any discussion. I hate that. But let me tell you something. What we did yesterday is probably worse. When it's in the House rules, And let me tell you, I voted against the House rules, and so did many Democrats. But it says that when the bill is in calendar and rules, on certain bills, if they want to decide, Democrats get 45 minutes to talk and Republicans get 45 minutes to talk. This is not a debate. And what happens is leadership selects the members who can talk. And then maybe you submit a list to the speaker, or Leader Camper called everybody off of the list. But that's not what our founding fathers meant. A debate is when somebody, according to Robert's rules or Mason's rules, which we used, when a sponsor's up there presenting their bill, the way Mason rule states is first person to raise their hand gets called on. And so that is the way debate is supposed to happen. And then say, I would have a question about hold harmless, and I ask my question, and the sponsor literally is supposed to answer my question. So say the sponsor answered my question, and say they answered it in a weirdo roundabout way where really didn't answer it. Well, somebody else can raise their hand. It's like, I don't understand your answer. Can you clarify what you meant when you said X? That's a debate.
Right.
That is deliberation on a bill. Folks at home can hear that. But when you say, okay, we have 9 people that have 4.5 minutes to speak. Now, I had some questions.
It's a charade.
Well, I want people to understand what this means. So, because what happens is it's almost like we're giving them cover, because folks at home that think that's a debate. Oh, everybody or some people got to talk. No, everybody who wanted to talk did not get to talk. And I couldn't ask the questions I wanted to ask to get clarification on the bill for folks at home. Because if I had asked Leader Lamberth a question, I had 4.5 minutes. If I took 30 seconds to ask a question, he would have eaten up 4 minutes with an answer. I never would have gotten the rest of my time because he would have used it. And so sometimes I have some quick rapid fire questions and need to ask those. But what we have to do now is just give a 4.5 minute speech, because they're going to eat up our time that we don't if we ask questions.
One of the things is it seems like everybody's mind is always made up before we get there anyway. So is it really just, for the benefit of the people at home, or do you actually feel like minds can be changed?
Oh, I think on this particular bill, especially, minds could have been changed, because like I'm telling you, I think a lot of their folks didn't read the bill. And if you hold their feet to the fire and say, on the fiscal note, on page 5, it says this.
Right.
Then they have to answer that in front of their folks. And so that is what, like, a lot of times they'll, they won't call on you because you're not on the list or whatever. But so many times it's a bill that I don't even plan on speaking on because, maybe I didn't have it in committee or whatever. But I'll hear something in the response between the sponsor and one of the members, be it a Republican or a Democrat, that will give me a question. And I will raise my hand.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, they will not call on you.
Yeah, I've seen you and Justin with your hands raised and you sitting there and they ignore you most of the time. That seems to happen quite a bit.
They're directing who gets to speak. So when they allot these 45 minutes for you and 45 minutes for you, leadership decides who speaks, because I understand that people want, I had a lot to say on that bill yesterday. I didn't get to say half of what I wanted to say, but a lot of other people wanted to say something too and weren't allowed. There have been times throughout Tennessee history that you debated days on a particular piece of legislation, especially one that takes such a huge chunk of the budget, and it's going to cause a tax increase
right
for Tennessee families. We should be hashing this out. And when I say hashing that, we're not going to be arguing. We're just going to be asking questions, asking for clarification. Tell me how this works, because you're saying it's in the bill, but it's not in the numbers.
Right.
And
Now,
for example,
do you think there's more that you keep talking about leadership? Like, do you think Democratic leadership could be doing more to push back on what they're doing rules wise?
well, I think we're in a situation where what people are thinking is we want to be able to talk on the bill. Maybe we should do this. Now, and we might differ in opinions as Democrats, but I say don't do anything that limits the spontaneous debate. And if they want to shut off all debate on a $1 billion policy, maybe Tennesseans need to see that.
Right.
And I want to see legitimate deliberation, legitimate debate on legislation. They are so afraid of debate on their bills. That is why they are doing this, and we shouldn't be giving them cover. But according to the way the rules written, I'll be honest with you. If our minority leadership said no, we don't want to do it that way, it says that the way it's worded is that the majority will, in consultation with the minority. Well, in consultation, does that mean we have to agree? Or if we don't agree, does that mean it doesn't happen?
Right. It sounds pretty vague.
But for me, that's not debate at all. And especially when your 45 minutes goes first and the Republican 45 minutes goes right before the bill.
Right. That's always whoever gets the last word there. Here's how they voted for people who maybe didn't get to see it. This is the vote. Pearson had the wrong button pushed for him. He was out of the room. So it's actually 53-45. And you can see there, usually there's a lot less of a split, but on this bill in particular, a lot of Republicans voted with the Democrats against this bill, including a lot of Republicans in rural parts of the state. So we heard a lot from people on the right, conservatives, who were against this bill for various reasons. The price tag was a big part of it, and entitlement. Is that your sense that there were a lot of Republicans who are against this bill also?
There were a lot of Republicans against this bill, a lot of them that voted for it but didn't want to. I talked to several of them, and we're talking about four votes less, and they wouldn't have gotten there because you have to get to 50. And so it's not just a majority of votes, they have to get to 50.
Right.
And it's very, very frustrating. It is going to be they're defunding public education, and it's not how it starts. We started with charter schools.
Yeah.
But this is how we finish it for sure, and they want to finish it. And rural folks believe what they were told by their leadership. And I have to go back to the trigger ban. Because with the trigger ban, if you recall, Dr. Briggs said he didn't read the bill. He trusted what his leadership told him. And then he didn't agree he trusted his leadership when they said there was an exception for life of the mother. And there was no exception for life of the mother.
There was no exception. Although I will say, I don't know, some of these guys, even if they read it, I don't know if they'd be able to absorb what the hell
I read it.
reading.
I read it and I got it.
Right.
And he's a smart man. But
no, not Briggs. I'm talking about like
oh, the other one. Well,
yeah, Paul Sherrill and these guys that if he read the bill, is he really going to absorb? Is he going to know what he's looking at? It's complicated sometimes.
Maybe somebody could read it too.
So we saw the lobbyists were happy about what happened. They were in the lobby. They were licking their chops. There's our friend Michael Lotfy, and this is how much they spent.
Yeah, he's the guy he's the guy who was fired twice from the House and had to repay money that he stole from the state. Yeah, that's him.
Right. And so there was a lot of lobbyist money involved here. They also were playing a lot of dirty tricks, taking funding away from East Tennessee senators like Senator Seal and Senator Sutherland, who opposed the bill in the Senate side. So there was a lot of pressure being applied. And, we saw Rep. Warner wasn't allowed to speak. And so he last night posted this long post about Republican leadership, saying that he was silenced by Sexton Lamberth and his caucus chairman, Jeremy Faison, treating us like children, to use his word. And he said he called it corruption and basically said the swamp in Tennessee is fuller than ever. And so that's a Republican talking about Republican leadership and echoing a lot of the same things that Gloria is saying.
And the thing about that is Rep Warner is my seatmate. And I knew he was against vouchers, and when somebody had asked him, "Hey, are you speaking?" He's like, "They're not going to let me speak," and of course they didn't. But we were looking into, can we yield our time? Which, according to Roberts or Mason's rules, you can call another representative's name. You can yield your time to them, but not in our House rules. In our House rules, you're not allowed to do that.
Ah, interesting. And I thought actually, didn't Rep Powell at one point talk about how he hoped to hear from Warner and representatives like that? I think he used 30 seconds to say,
They've muzzled their own folks who
right.
might have the courage to speak out. Rep Warner has spoken out forcefully. Now, we probably disagree on everything else.
Right.
We're together on that.
But I'm wondering, obviously we're still a couple years away from the next election, and so it's hard to know what's going to stick. And obviously people have short attention spans, but already we've seen back in their districts, Republicans are speaking up about voucher backing Republicans. We're seeing Kip Capley. He has a Lawrence County School Board member speaking up about him, and then other Republicans are in the comments talking about finding a primary challenger. Clay Doggett, I've seen getting some blowback. This is Senator Adam Lowe getting some blowback. So what do you think the chances are that by the time the next election rolls around, people are still remembering this stuff?
Well, I think it's going to be our job to remind them. I mean, we're going to have to remind them of this. We know that it certainly had an effect on the Hill brothers and Micah Van Huss's election after they voted for vouchers, and they didn't come back after 2019. So hopefully they hold people accountable. But what I want people to understand, what I think is so critical, what happened yesterday, what you saw both sides speaking, was not a debate, and it was not the best way to deliberate on legislation. And even at one point, one of the Republican members said, "I like when we do it this way." Of course they like when we do it that way.
Yeah, right.
Because I can't respond when they say crazy. Because, it's their time to talk. We had our time. But it even doesn't matter if somebody's saying something nutty or a complete lie. Sometimes that member might say something that makes me go, "Oh, wait, but if that's the thing, what about this?" And you have a genuine question, and you can't answer it because they're so afraid of
Right.
not controlling the discussion. And if your policy is solid, and if your points are good, you're not afraid to deliberate them.
Yeah, and that's really the theme that we've seen basically ever since Cameron Sexton took office is, finding ways to quiet dissent, finding ways to kick people out of the balcony, kick reps out of their seats, expulsions, dissent, troopers in the rotunda, tickets in the gallery, ropes in the rotunda, moving the press conference into his office so that I can't be there, so that the Justins can't watch. Think about what's going on here. And
Yeah,
how about not letting Tennessee conservative news into the press conferences? It's not just about me anymore. It's about the right wing also. So this is something that should bother everybody, regardless of, where you are on the political spectrum.
It's outrageous, the idea that you go to timeout if you get called out of order on the floor. People have been called out of order for the whole history, but now you have to go to timeout and
Right.
be in a room with no one else and vote quietly by yourself. I mean, that's like the worst elementary school teacher ever, making nutty rules because they don't know how to control their classroom.
Yeah.
And afraid of, someone using their voice, for heaven's sake. So it's all middle school bully. I mean, it really, really is.
That's how it feels.
I watched in committee as the chairman of the ed committee, and one of the members bullied an 18-year-old who had the courage to speak up at the meeting. And once they bullied that 18-year-old and made them look small, they did what an 18-year-old does and pushes back on it. And then they yell at them for pushing back on it. And it's really embarrassing that they can't be the adults in the room. And instead, they go back to their middle school bullying times. To see a committee chairman bully a guest is something. And then, like you said, having those members carried out for a first time member. My colleague Rep Brooks, she was in tears when folks were being carried out, because that's she's seen it before, maybe from the other side.
Right.
Being a member, watching that happen and knowing it was 1000% unnecessary is just remarkable.
And it's about the message that they send. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily about what's happening to that person. They're doing it to basically threaten anybody else from getting out of line. And that's generally how they work. And they just expect you not to understand it.
And
You
I
know,
think go
I was
ahead.
just going to say they do a lot of gaslighting about it too.
Yeah.
One of the things that was kind of a theme of this special session was that it was tied to disaster funding. And, it's sort of inarguable that they tied it to disaster funding, at least optically, by having a special session for vouchers with a special session for disaster funding. And a lot of the reps that they had a hard time getting on board with the vouchers were in that area in East Tennessee. They could have had a special session a long time before this, as evidenced by the fact that North Carolina did do that 11 days after the disaster, after the flood. And so the theme and the accusation that Democrats and others were leveling at them was that they are tying this to voucher funding. And they kept saying, well, that's not what's happening. You're going to vote on it separately. But it turns out it wasn't just Democrats, because we had the Hawkins County superintendent in committee, and he spoke to the Senate, and he told the Senate that his mayor, his county mayor, who was one of the mayors that joined a letter supporting vouchers that Governor Lee bragged about. Well, he told his superintendent that after he met with Governor Lee, he felt pressured to support the voucher scam. Watch this.
Hey, you mentioned this legislation being tied to disaster aid. Where did you get that information that these two bills were tied together?
I appreciate the question, and I'm going to put my mayor on the spot a little bit. My mayor emailed me directly several weeks ago after a meeting with the governor, in which he specifically stated he felt pressured to support this legislation in order to secure or potentially secure past, current, and future relief funding for the county.
Okay.
So that was the superintendent blatantly saying that the mayor felt pressured to join this letter that you see at the top of the screen right there, that was quarterbacked by Patty Woodby of Carter County, who's on screen here. Patty was also at the legislature speaking on the disaster funding piece of all of this. And I saw her in the hallway, and I went up to her, asked her a question, and I didn't even get it out of my mouth before she sprinted in the other direction. We're asked to support the vouchers to get.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, so how guilty? I don't think I've ever seen anybody look guiltier from a question that I've asked them than Patty Woodby did right there. But it just seems so obvious that these people actually were pressured to support vouchers to get disaster funding, which is absolutely unconscionable and shameless. Gloria, is that what you think happened here?
That's absolutely what happened, and it's so unfortunate that that's who the current Republican Party in Tennessee is. I mean, that's who they are, and it's very frustrating. That is why, for myself, I say we need to stop covering for the Republicans and make them allow them to make themselves look like we're having a debate. If they want to call the question and none of us get to talk, I hate that. However, they need to be shown for the authoritarians that they are, and we cannot be giving them cover. If they shut down the arguments in the committee, are they going to start shutting down the arguments in committee and then creating some, theater with letting a few members make a few minutes?
Well, I think that's the important point, because the thing that moved this state forward more than anything else was the expulsions. What happened to you three, the Tennessee three, because it exposed what was going on here in a way that people hadn't realized, that a lot of us had been screaming about for a very long time. But it was the crackdown and the reaction to the action that really exposed them for who they are. And so, yeah, it's like you're saying, if you just go along with it and normalize it and just participate in it, that is not really showing what's actually happening here. You have to show people what's happening by being silenced, by being carried out, by taking these actions, by taking these peaceful, good trouble actions that for so long throughout our history have exposed the authoritarians for who they are. And so, yeah, giving them the consultation, making the deals, playing by their rules, that is not going to get it done. And I think that's ultimately what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because by having that fake debate that we had yesterday on the education, on the voucher bill, the voucher scam, it for people who aren't as nuanced, they thought we were having a debate.
Right.
And what they need to see is what that would have been like if we had not done it that way. If we had had a general
Right. Things like walking out, or, things like
it
getting silenced, or, trying to cut it off before having, there needs to be more of a wake up call given to our state, especially in that moment yesterday on the voucher bill, because
yeah.
that was one where there were a lot of conservatives and Republicans who were on your side. And so that's a moment where, people are paying attention. There's a lot of, bipartisanship going on. And so, that's a moment to take advantage of.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm kind of the weird one. If you notice, a lot of the other side of the aisle are just milling around and being loud. We have to ask them to be quiet when it's our turn to talk. But one thing I do is I pay attention to the speaker. Even if I'm looking at my phone, I'm paying attention to the speaker. And I think they had 2 speakers yesterday that were against the vouchers, but they spoke very, very tamely about their opposition.
No, right, exactly, because they want to
And
be able
so,
to say, yeah,
right,
we let some
Warner-
anti-voucher Republicans speak, right? They let the non-fiery ones, David Hawk, who, even in his speech, he took shots at the other side. I'm not against it for all the reasons you people are saying I'm against it for, and then Lowell Russell, who it's maybe the second time I've ever heard him speak. Right. They let the mousy ones speak up.
And there's no way they're going to let Todd Warner speak because he's going to blast it.
Or Fritz.
And they're just so afraid
and calculated.
Yeah, and calculated, and we cannot help it. And I understand that my members really wanted to speak on this because we all understand. We read the bill. We talk about it with each other line by line.
Right.
We read the fiscal note and we know what it's going to do, and we've seen it in all these other states.
You kooky Dems reading the fiscal
These
note.
guys just trust what they are told. And so if we could actually deliberate this bill on the floor, even some of them, because some of them are starting to say now, I trust you more than I trust my colleagues.
We're hearing that. I mean, I've been hearing that from Republicans about the holler too. We've had a couple, we had some Wilson County Republicans. I had some Wilson County Republicans come up to me in the hallway who had seen our video of Clark Boyd basically dismissing what the school board in Wilson County had said about vouchers. And, they were saying, well, they're already telling all their people never to support Clark Boyd in a primary again, and that they read what we say. They don't agree with us all the time. But I mean, even Senator Taylor this week basically said that he appreciates that we keep things in context. So, it's possible to disagree about things and still be giving each other the facts.
Well, right. Who's coming in my office now is the Tennessee Conservative News.
Right. And you actually got some good coverage from the Tennessee Conservative News yesterday in the Rotunda. They wrote, that people were cheering for you guys and booing Cameron Sexton as he went in, because they understand that even if they may agree with Cameron on some things, corruption is bad.
Well,
and
even, I enjoyed talking to their reporter in my office because we could have a conversation. And so I don't mind talking to the opposition if you're actually allowed to talk, if you're actually allowed to exchange ideas. So they've called me for comments a couple of times, and I've given them.
Right.
If you're respectful as a reporter or a journalist, I'm happy to talk to you.
Right.
Some of these guys that won't let you answer, or come on my podcast so I can cut your mic a million times and talk over you. No thanks. I've got no interest in that.
That's a different story. All right. Well, Gloria, thanks for coming on and talking to us. We'll definitely, it's amazing to think that this session hasn't even really started yet.
Right.
but we got another couple months of this, so you'll come back on and talk to us about whatever happens next. I do think there's some stickiness to what just happened, and like you said, it's going to be up to people to remind them of what happened and keep it in mind when the time comes.
We are in a time with what's happening federally and in our state and even locally that we have got to continue to push back, and we've got to continue to explain to folks who may not fully understand it what it is, and because so that they'll know what to look for, because it's it's that whole, it's ultimately they're coming for all of us, because this is about inequality. This is about putting more and more money in the pockets of billionaires, and the income inequality that we're seeing that's not going to change unless we do something different. And this was billionaires from out of state that just made this happen. Tennesseans did not want it. It was clear they didn't want it, but they had these manufactured polls from the billionaires. The billionaires did the polls.
They back the polls. They have these shell companies that they use to put them out. And the thing that bothers me more than anything is when they do that, and it's so obvious that they're doing it, the media plays right along and gives them all the headlines that they want, as though this is like a legit thing. So, and that's one thing I think for our people that are watching to keep in mind. It's like, pay attention to the role the media plays in keeping this charade going. I'm not saying there's no good reporters in Tennessee. I'm not going to say that, but I am going to say that as a group, the media does not do enough to call this what it is and push back. And that doesn't make them, objective. That makes them complicit.
Yeah, no, exactly. And a lot of times it's not just that. There is so much, and they are so underfunded.
That's true.
Constantly switching reporters like at the TV station.
That's true.
Once you catch up, they move you to the next town.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
So you got to educate another, new reporter to what Tennessee is doing. And, that's all.
No, that's true. And there's like a lack of institutional knowledge in a lot of the people that are up there covering this stuff where, that I didn't have before I got there, that I have now. I mean, even just knowing who they are is like first thing. And then, the second thing is like having the receipts to know, okay, if he said this thing, but I know he said something different 2 years ago, like now I have that.
Yeah.
But when you get here in 3 months and then you're covering these guys, like you just take what they say for granted because you don't realize they said exactly the opposite 2 years ago. Like, for instance, here, I'll play this clip that I've had teed up. This is Jeremy Faison. He has called the voucher vote that he had a while back the vote he regrets more than anything else that he's ever taken. And now he's suddenly a big voucher guy. And so nobody's asking him about that. Like, where are the people asking him? You called this the vote that you regret more than, look, top left right there. I have probably regretted that vote more than any vote I've taken in 2020, back when the board got held open and there was a whole federal investigation about how this thing passed and the bribes and threats, according to Kent Calfee, who's a Republican. Faison says he regrets it because he was getting shit from people in his district. Well, now he's all for it and leading the charge. So I asked him about it and he has no answer for that. So he started attacking the birthmark on my eye. Watch.
You called the last voucher vote the one you regret more than any other vote, and now you seem to be back.
Oh, that was years ago.
Changed? Oh, now you're pro voucher?
Okay.
What changed? I'm just curious.
No answer.
What changed? If you regretted that so much, you called it the one you regret the most. What changed?
What happened to your eye?
What happened to your eye? So he goes after the birthmark on my eye because he's got no answer for what changed other than corruption and selling out our kids. That's
Justin,
what happened to my eye, Jeremy.
Yeah, Justin, what I would say is we do know that Cobb County is one of the highly affected counties. So, did he have to do that for what he needed to get? Not have to do that. Nobody has to do that. Because if the governor offered me something, I would tell it all, and I would tell it every day, and I'd sing it from the rooftops.
Exactly, which is what John Mark did, when he allegedly got offered the military promotion. But Jeremy Faison turning and making fun of my eye, which I've had that my whole life. I'm not sensitive about that, but it just shows that he has nothing for that very basic question that somebody should be asking the caucus chair of the House Republicans. What changed? Speaker Sexton also used to be against vouchers. What changed? Jack Johnson said that he would never support vouchers in Williamson County. What changed? Where are these people being asked about this?
Becky Massey adamantly opposed. What changed?
Exactly. Yes. It's like, I know you are, but what am I? Exactly, Trilina. Yes. And it just, yes, Faison is who pulled the ref's pants down, Vicky. That's correct. We need to be very specific about reminding people which Jeremy Faison. It is the Jeremy Faison that tried to pull down a ref's pants in a gym full of children. And now we can see that he is a child. What's that? At a Christian school, yes. But I mean, it's just so obvious how badly these guys are selling out our kids and our public schools, and everybody should be pissed off, and everybody should remember it for a long time to come. So Gloria,
just trying to help them remember it. So thanks, Justin.
Good. I know you will. All right. Thanks, Gloria. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you soon.
See ya.
So that is Gloria Johnson, who stood up for kids. Obviously, we saw the vouchers passed, and they passed the Senate, they passed the House. Important to keep in mind the number 4, because 4 votes flipping in either chamber, 4 seats in either chamber, either or would have stopped this thing. But they had their vote count, millions flooded Republican primaries. They got the thing passed, and now our public schools are going to feel the pain. Property taxes are going to end up going up because the budgets are going to explode. And this is not going to be something that does not hurt public schools, no matter what they said. This hold harmless thing was nonsense, obviously. And it's what they wanted to tell themselves to get this thing through. Just as one more thing, just because we're giving Faison his shine. And so I want to give Jack Johnson his shine. Another gaslighter in chief is Jack Johnson, who Williamson County Senator, my senator, who never talks to me other than to yell at me when I am finally able to trigger him. He says that they have never said the vouchers were about helping disadvantaged kids. The whole presentation of this voucher plan all along has been, we need these vouchers to help save these kids from failing schools, failing quote unquote schools, these disadvantaged kids, save them from failing schools. That is what they have been saying for as long as I've heard them talk about this stuff. That's what they've convinced their rank and file Republicans they're doing. It's this saviorism. When Governor Lee had his big presentation last year of these quote unquote education freedom scholarships, they had a low income family there with them, a black family with them, to like tell their story and talk about how this saved them from these dire straits of these, prison public schools. And now, because they wanted to open these things up to wealthy families because they are coupons for the wealthy, it just exposes the lie that these are about disadvantaged kids. And instead of going with the lie, still, Jack Johnson is now saying, oh, I never said that. He's now saying it was never about disadvantaged kids. And he's saying it with a straight face, even though literally a week ago, he was saying the opposite. Watch this.
Jack, how did you say that with a straight face that you never said this was for disadvantaged kids? My God, Jack. Good morning. Hey, Jack, how can you say you never said this was for disadvantaged
Because
kids?
I never did.
Yes, you did. You said it last week, man. I was there.
I never did.
I have
You
on
always
video.
stalk people in and
I
out of the
have you on
bathroom.
video saying
That's
Jack.
kind of creepy.
Why do you lie so easily?
Why do you stalk
How do
people
you
going
lie
in and out
so
of the
easily?
bathroom? I mean,
It's so
you're
lying
creep.
comes so easily to you, huh, Jack?
So that's me asking Jack about it. Now here's the receipts.
Lying comes so easily to Jack Johnson.
A couple of things that were said that I don't believe are accurate. As the sponsor of this legislation, I've never once said that this was a program designed for disadvantaged families. And I've never heard the governor say that. I've never heard any advocate for this legislation.
For the argument, oh, the rich family. No, I'm thinking of the single mom in Memphis that's working 3 jobs.
That was last week. I'm thinking of the single mom in Memphis working 3 jobs. And then Eric Welch, Williamson County School Board member, said, why isn't the bill written more for those people, low-income people, people who work 3 jobs? If you had tailored it to that group that you're talking about, there might actually be more support for it. But that's not what this is. And we've seen that 80 to 90% of the people who use these things in the states that have passed this have kids that are already in private schools.
So why isn't the bill written more towards her, someone on the federal poverty program only? the minimum cap, and it's only for half of it, it's 176,000 if I'm correct. That's for half of them, and the other half is uncapped.
Right. So half of these are for people who are making 300% of the free and reduced lunch rate, which, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's $175,000 a year, which is like double the average income in any county. It's higher than the median income. It's not a low amount of money. And then the other half are completely uncapped, meaning 10,000 scholarships, they're vouchers, 10,000 vouchers that they don't want us to call them, but vouchers are going to people who are already in private schools, who already have the ability to send their kids to private schools, even millionaires. Like if you're somebody who's a millionaire, right, who sends your kid to private school, or not a millionaire, but whatever, you send your kid to private school, you're doing well, you have the money, and this passes, why would you not take it? It's free money. And that's what's happening in these other states. Google it. Arizona, Ohio. Budgets are exploding because what's happening is they're double funding education. They are putting billions of dollars into private school pockets. And yes, that is impacting public school budgets. Of course it is. And maybe the greatest scam I've seen since I've been covering this legislature is the way that they convinced Republicans who are voting on this that they are holding public schools harmless. I mean, it's unbelievable, but they actually got a number of them to believe that. And we will very soon come to see how big of a lie that was. This does not hold public schools harmless. This was a scam, and it was pushed through in 3 days in a special session using disaster relief as cover. If you're not pissed off, you're not paying attention. Thanks for following, and we'll see you next time.